The minute Brady slapped his sneakered foot on the boardroom table and said, "What we need is disruptive momentum," I knew we were officially circling the corporate drain. I just spent 3 hours untangling a vendor issue that would have delayed our delivery schedule by 6 weeks, quietly saving the quarter without needing a standing ovation. Meanwhile, the CEO's son, fresh off whatever wellness retreat, birthed this cursed new title of Chief Innovation Officer, suggesting we gamify compliance. I wish I were kidding. Gamify compliance. This was a Tuesday. By Thursday, he was asking if we could monetize downtime by incentivizing task ambiguity. That one actually made someone snort in the back of the room. I didn't laugh. I'd seen this movie before, and I knew how it ended. Some overlecoifed failson tries to duct tape buzzwords onto operational pipelines he doesn't understand, and when the wheels fall off, they blame the woman who told them they were loose in the first place. I should probably mention I'm Karen, 47, Director of Strategic Operations. Been here 9 years. I don't speak unless it's necessary, I don't panic unless the server room's on fire, and I don't indulge ego unless it's in the contract. I've survived 3 CEOs, 2 mergers, and the time our CTO tried to move our cloud infrastructure onto his personal NAS for cost reasons. What I do is keep things running smoothly, legally, and with as few lawsuits as possible. By contrast, Brady thinks workflow hygiene means wiping his phone screen with his sleeve. He came back from Aspen with a whiteboard, an executive title, and a weekly sync sesh he tried to schedule on Fridays at 5 p.m. The kind of guy who calls Outlook a legacy platform and once tried to submit a PDF by screenshotting it and pasting it into a Google Doc. I'm not even mad. I'm exhausted. I should probably pause here and say, if you're still listening and enjoy stories where corporate karma gets served on a chilled silver platter with a side of humiliation, take 2 seconds to hit that like button and maybe subscribe. 90% of people forget, and I swear it makes the team so damn happy. Back to Brady and the slow-motion wreck he was piloting. The first time he interrupted one of my meetings, he didn't even introduce himself. Just barged in, clicked present on the conference room monitor, and started showing a pitch deck full of stock photos of mountain climbers and one terrifying slide that said Beast Mode OPS in Comic Sans. I just stared at him. When he was done, I said, "Is there a business request embedded in any of that?" He blinked. "I'm ideating. Try doing it silently next time." To his credit, he didn't retaliate, yet. Just logged off, then immediately sent a feedback form to my direct reports asking how adaptable I was to new paradigms. The truth was, I'd been shielding him more than fighting him, cleaning up behind the scenes, reformatting his meeting notes before they hit the investors, reassigning people he mismanaged before they could escalate to HR. I didn't do it for him, I did it for the company. Because at the end of the day, someone had to keep the lights on. But it wasn't just Brady. The whole leadership culture was rotting from the top down. The CEO had checked out, too busy grooming his legacy, literally and metaphorically. He kept saying things like Brady's ideas are fresh and we need to modernize the hierarchy. But modernization without foundation is just a PowerPoint presentation waiting to collapse. We had contracts teetering on technicalities, vendors operating without updated SOs, and an investor milestone coming up that required 6 layers of regulatory oversight, all of which lived invisibly on my desk. It wasn't ego. It was infrastructure. I didn't talk about what I managed because the point was for no one to notice when it worked. Was the job invisible efficiency? And that's what scared Brady the most. You can't dominate what you don't understand. You can't replace what you don't know exists, so he started poking. Questioning my meetings, reassigning small tasks, scheduling alignment reviews with my analysts. Once he walked by my desk and muttered, "Deadwood doesn't prune itself." Cute. I grew up around lumberyards. Deadwood's not what clogs the system. It's the fungus that thinks it's the tree. By the time we hit the first week of the quarter, I could smell the smoke curling under the door. He wanted a confrontation. But I don't yell, I don't slam things. I don't bark on Slack threads at 11 p.m. like he does. I wait, I log, I prepare. And when the call finally came, when Brady decided to go full Icarus over a client presentation, I didn't even flinch. Because when someone thinks they're untouchable, they forget to check if the wires they're cutting are live. It happened during the Q3 alignment call with our aerospace client, the one with the $40 million milestone tied to deliverables, where every word had to be calibrated like we were defusing a bomb. We were mid-sentence, literally mid-sentence, when my cell buzzed 3 times in a row. Same number, no voicemail, no context, just Brady, trying to break through like a toddler pounding on a locked bathroom door. I muted myself, stepped away from the mic, and answered because I assumed someone had died, or that a server had caught fire, or, God forbid, he'd tried to upload a GDPR compliance doc to TikTok again. "Karen," he snapped, no hello, no preamble. "Why aren't you in the brainstorm?" "What brainstorm?" I asked, already half knowing the answer. "The branding alignment sesh," he said. Like I was the idiot. "I scheduled it 5 minutes ago. I need you in the room. I'm on a call with Lockwell Defense. You approved the agenda." "Well, this is more important," he spat. "We're reimagining the visual tone of the roadmap." I paused, gave him a full beat of silence. You want me to leave a milestone compliance review to discuss fonts? They're not fonts, they're emotive vectors. I swear on everything holy, he said that with his whole chest. I didn't yell. I didn't argue, I said as calmly as I could, Brady, I'll follow up after this call. That's when he snapped. No, I'm the CEO's son, I call you answer, you're fired. Do you hear me? Fired. For a moment, I just stood there, the receiver hot in my hand, listening to my heartbeat thud against the silence on the other end. Fired, like it was that easy. Like I was a coffee machine he could unplug. Like 9 years of infrastructure, continuity, and trust could be dismissed by a tantrum in Vans. I didn't respond. I didn't indulge him. I hung up without a word, walked back to my desk, unmuted, rejoined the Lockwell call like nothing happened, closed out the final scope discussion, smiled politely as the client said, as always, Karen, your team makes it easy to sign off. After the call ended, I sat there for a few seconds, long enough to hear the air conditioner kick on and the distant clack of some junior PM trying to print a 400-page PDF on the wrong tray. Then I opened my inbox. Searched. Funding Agreement, Clause 7, Oversight Disbursement. There it was. The email I'd flagged months ago. The line I knew by heart. All capital disbursements are contingent upon active oversight by the registered operational officer. Any change to the designated party must be filed and accepted in writing by the board and all lead investors prior to disbursement. I hit forward. Subject, FYI body, just in case. Sent it to my personal account, nothing else. Then I stood up. I didn't slam drawers, didn't stage a dramatic exit. I didn't even clear my browser history because I had nothing to hide and they had everything to lose. I grabbed my coat, half-empty thermos I always meant to wash, and a ficus plant I'd managed to keep alive longer than 3 COOs, walked past the front desk, nodded at security, held the elevator door for someone from HR who didn't even look up from her phone. The strangest part? No one stopped me. Not a peep from legal. Not a Slack ping from HR. Not even a we need to talk from Brady. I might as well have been a ghost already. By the time I reached the parking lot, the sun was just starting to dip, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement like God was dragging a rake across the sky. I sat in my car for a while, engine off, phone face down. Let the silence do its work. There's a peculiar peace in being underestimated, because while they're celebrating your absence, they don't realize the clock has already started ticking. And the fuse, it's been lit. 3 days. That's how long it took me to realize I was officially fired. Unofficially, no email from HR, no exit paperwork, no Cobra packet showing up in my inbox like a greasy hangover. Nothing, just silence. Corporate, cowardly silence. Like they were hoping I'd just vanish into the retirement fog with a thank you card and a sheet cake they forgot to order. But I'm not built for passive fades. I don't disappear, I observe. The morning after Brady's hissy fit, I made coffee in my kitchen like I did every weekday, still waking up at 5:30 out of muscle memory. I didn't cry, didn't rage, just sat at my counter with my planner open to a calendar that no longer applied to me and stared at a to-do list full of meetings I wasn't attending. Then I opened my laptop. First stop, the investment dashboard. The company had granted me a fairly aggressive equity package after our last acquisition, negotiated, mind you, while the CEO was too busy playing golf with the board. Brady wasn't even in the picture then, probably still doing keg stands in a frat house that smelled like Axe body spray and wet despair. I logged in, expected an alert, maybe a revocation notice, a pending action banner across the top of the portal. But no, everything was untouched. Vested options still active. No flags, no termination update. The system still thought I was employed. Interesting. And I checked my work inbox from my phone, curiosity, not desperation. Still active. Still no message from HR. My calendar hadn't even been cleared. I was still listed as the meeting host for Friday's operational forecast review. I laughed, a real laugh, short, bitter, honest. Because Brady didn't just fire me, he ghosted me. He wanted the drama of power without the follow-through. Wanted that I fired her without the paperwork that proves it. That's not leadership, that's cosplay. From what I could tell through LinkedIn posts and whispers from a few brave souls still on the inside, Brady was already strutting through the office like a peacock high on retail therapy, bragging to the marketing team about removing friction points, which apparently meant letting go of 3 directors and replacing them with agile-focused shadow pods. Don't ask. I think he got it from a Reddit thread. I didn't reach out to anyone, didn't try to claw my way back. I just watched. Checked Slack channels I still had access to. Watched a junior compliance analyst post a panicked message about missing chain of custody documentation for one of our larger vendors. Watched Brady respond with a gif of someone pouring gasoline on a computer. Cute. Meanwhile, vendor invoices were getting kicked back because the new guy, one of Brady's friends from undergrad, I think, didn't know how to approve SOs above a certain threshold. Finance was bottlenecked. Procurement started emailing just checking in more often than usual, which anyone in ops knows is code for we're about to blow a gasket. And then came the kicker, an investor email asking for clarification on milestone documentation. Apparently, no one had realized I was the only one cleared to verify certain compliance thresholds. It had to be me, not because I was special, but because my name was literally baked into the agreements. Not Director of Ops, not whoever's in charge, my name, Karen Monroe. I watched Brady give a LinkedIn Live about flattening verticals and leveraging digital maturity, and I swear to God, he said, we're stronger than ever while standing in front of a whiteboard that had Karen equals legacy bottleneck scribbled in red expo marker behind him. Strong enough to forget the single person who holds the key to your funding compliance? Ballsy. People started texting. Quiet ones mostly. The compliance lead. Hey, do you remember where the Q4 documentation log lives? The CFO's assistant. Do you know if we ever refiled the oversight designation clause after the merger? One particularly brave soul from IR sent a meme of a dumpster fire floating down a flooded street with the caption, "Today's vibes." I didn't answer most of them, just archived them. Let them stack up like dominoes on a slick floor, because that's the thing about power, they always assume it's in the room. They never imagine it might have walked out without slamming the door, and I hadn't slammed anything. I just left, quiet, calm, fully aware that they'd pulled the pin but kept holding the grenade. They thought they fired me. I was just getting started. It started with the weekly ops summary going out to the wrong distribution list. Not a huge deal on paper, except it included Q2 projections that hadn't been board approved yet, client names under NDA, and one unfortunate typo that listed our total backlog as $18 instead of $18 million. Brady thought it was funny, said it gave us scrappy charm. Legal didn't agree. Neither did the IR team, who fielded 3 frantic calls from our European investors asking if the company had suffered a catastrophic collapse overnight. By the following Monday, the cracks were forming visible fault lines. Deliverables were late. Internal escalation tickets started piling up. Our client portal, which I'd meticulously integrated with a self-healing error handler, was now spitting out access denials for top-tier customers because Brady's optimization team had tried to streamline the user flow by rewriting the permissions script with ChatGPT prompts. I could have fixed it in 20 minutes, maybe 15 with coffee. Instead, I sat on my porch in a hoodie sipping lukewarm tea and watching a squirrel bury what looked suspiciously like a McNugget in my flower bed. It was oddly therapeutic, messy, chaotic, natural. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through from a number I did recognize, Elise, one of the junior analysts I'd mentored back when she still thought KPIs were a type of protein bar. They're pretending you retired. I stared at it. No emojis, no context, just that. Apparently, in an all-hands meeting, Brady had announced I'd transitioned out gracefully after a long career, and that new leadership was taking operations in a bold new direction. No mention of being fired. No paperwork. No clarification. Just a soft erasure. Like I was some dusty trophy being moved to the attic. But they forgot the part where I built the damn shelf they were standing on. That same day, I got another call. This one from an IR manager I'd worked closely with Naveen. Not someone prone to panic. Smart. Calm. The type of guy who color codes his emails and reads contracts for fun. He left a voicemail. Just 6 words. Did you sign the verification packet? I hadn't, because no one had sent one. Because no one knew they needed it except me. Here's the deal. Every quarter, for our primary investor to release the next tranche of funding, we had to submit a milestone verification packet. It wasn't just a checklist. It was a formal document confirming all deliverables, contracts, and compliance thresholds were met. It had to be compiled by someone with verified oversight authority, someone whose name matched what was filed with the funding agreement. Guess who that someone was? Not Brady, not the CFO, not even the CEO. Just me, Karen Monroe. One very boring line buried on page 47 of a very boring PDF that everyone stopped reading after the 3rd round of edits 2 years ago. Brady, of course, had no idea, but someone upstairs had figured it out. And based on the rising tension in the chatter, LinkedIn job alerts suddenly spiking, project managers posting cryptic "so proud of this team," messages that read like eulogies, I knew the panic was blooming. The funny thing is, I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was vindicated, quietly, completely, because they didn't just replace me, they forgot what I did. They let the one person holding the entire compliance bridge together walk off into the sunset without even grabbing the map. Another ping, email this time. Subject, urgent Q3 disbursement protocol from Finance Controller at Hi Karen, hope you're well. Quick question, do you remember where we store the original milestone templates from the merger integration? We can't seem to locate the signed copies and Brady says you might have them. Appreciate your help. No salutation, no apology. Just that twitchy, desperate tone of someone realizing they've sent the race car down the track without checking the brakes. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. I'd already forwarded the email to my personal archive. I'd backed up the funding agreement, the original templates, and every internal memo where I'd reminded leadership that I needed formal authority renewal post-merger. They had no idea how deep the thread ran. And now they were about to learn what happens when you pull it. The email from legal came in at 10:12 a.m. Subject line sanitized to the point of comedy. Subject: friendly documentation request, time-sensitive smiling face with smiling eyes. The body was pure corporate theater, overpolished and desperate beneath the surface. It started with "Hi Karen, hope all is well," then stumbled awkwardly into the real ask. Could I, at my earliest convenience, affirm procedural oversight for the prior quarter in alignment with historical documentation protocols, a bloated, beige way of asking me to sign a compliance memo they'd clearly drafted 5 minutes ago. Backdated, of course. They didn't say it outright, but the attached PDF was dated 3 weeks earlier, with a signature line that had already been prefilled with my name and no signature. I stared at it for a full minute, closed it, reopened it, then marked the whole thread unread and dragged it to a folder I labeled "Nice Try." No reply. No negotiation. I wasn't going to jail because a man-child wanted to impress his dad with a slide deck and a stolen acronym. By lunch, 2 more messages followed, one from the CFO, polite and vague, and another from Brady's EA, who clearly had no idea what she was being asked to chase down. Hey Karen, just circling back on that quick doc sign-off, Brady's hoping to present Thursday. Quick doc sign-off. That quick doc represented federal-level compliance attestation tied to our investor funding. It wasn't a grocery list. It was the last lock on a vault door. And it had my name on it, literally and legally, and no one else could turn the key. That afternoon, the lead investor's office placed a call to the CEO directly. Not the CFO, the CEO. According to someone still brave enough to text me, the tone was cordial but clipped. The ask was simple. When would the formal milestone verification be submitted for Q3 so that the $40 million disbursement could be processed? The CEO, probably sipping his third turmeric smoothie and pretending to understand Brady's whiteboard diagrams, deferred to his son. Brady, in his infinite confidence, told them everything was under control. He even said, out loud, that operations are running better than ever. I wish I could have seen their faces. By 5:03 p.m., the investor's lawyer requested a clause review. That was the moment the music stopped. Clause 7.3 of the funding agreement. It was never meant to be dramatic, just a bit of governance boilerplate that no one read after the third revision. But I read it, I memorized it. It had my title, my name, and the specific language that tied milestone verification to a designated operational oversight officer, singular, not plural. Any change to that designation required board approval and documented consent from the lead investor, filed at least 10 business days before the milestone review. They had filed nothing. I hadn't resigned. They hadn't terminated me formally. There was no successor named. They'd fired me with a phone call tantrum, and then tried to pretend I just evaporated. Now the only thing standing between the company and a $40 million cash injection was a PDF that required my signature. The irony was beautiful. A compliance clause, buried and boring, overlooked by every ego in the room, now weaponized by its own neglect. I wasn't excited. I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt calm, cold, deliberate calm. I went for a walk, left my phone on the kitchen counter, watched a couple kids play with a busted skateboard down the street, and thought about how many times I'd been told to be a team player by men who wouldn't last 10 minutes in a real ops crisis. When I got back, I had 6 unread messages. 3 from legal, 1 from the EA again, 1 from Naveen in IR, apologizing for the confusion, and 1 from the investor's assistant. Karen, we'd like to set up a short conversation off the record. Please let us know if you're open. I didn't answer, not because I was being petty, because I didn't need to speak. The clause would do it for me, it was already loaded. All they had to do was try to fake another document and let it explode in their face. It started with a calendar invite. Subject, urgent, governance compliance briefing time, 7:30 a.m. Next day attendees, board members plus external counsel location. Private Zoom link, no details. No pre-reads, just bold red text flagged by the investor's office and a start time early enough to rattle anyone not wearing crisis-grade deodorant. You don't schedule something that early unless you're about to torch someone's reputation before they've had their morning coffee. I didn't get the invite, of course, but one of the attendees forwarded me a screenshot with 0 commentary. Just the image, no caption, no follow-up. They didn't need to explain. My name, Karen Monroe, was still listed in the investor compliance log as the named operational oversight officer. Capital letters, filed, verified, legally binding. They'd fired me over a tantrum and never scrubbed the record, never filed the termination, never reassigned the role. They just moved on like my institutional knowledge and regulatory authority would dissipate into thin air as soon as Brady smirked into a ring light. Only now the board was asking questions. Someone in governance had stumbled over the gap between what Brady said and what the documents showed. And in our world, that's not a gap, it's a breach. I heard from another whisper inside legal that the funding clause wasn't the only one with my name on it. Apparently, I'd been the designated approver on 4 other risk matrices, including one that impacted vendor eligibility. And since the ops team had tried to onboard a new partner just last week without that verification, well, let's just say the fuse was hissing now. Meanwhile, Brady was doing what Brady does, waving off real problems with fake confidence. At pre-meeting with his dad, he apparently chuckled and called the issue just paperwork. Like governance was a sticker chart and not a time bomb with a timer ticking down to 0. I imagine the CEO nodded, maybe even believed him. That's the thing about men who fail upward. They confuse volume with value. And Brady had volume in spades. The latest was that he wanted to rename the compliance function to something more disruptive. His pitch was integrity operations. Because apparently, when you don't understand a system, your first instinct is to give it a new name and hope no one notices the foundation cracking underneath. That night, I got a LinkedIn message. Not from a recruiter, not from a friend. From the general counsel of our lead investor. Hi Karen, hope you're well. Would you be open to a brief off-the-record conversation this week? Just a few clarifications. No pressure, of course, no pressure. It was so polite, it was menacing. I didn't reply immediately. Let it sit there. Watched the little scene status blink on and off for 10 minutes like they were holding their breath. The truth was, I wasn't angry anymore. Wasn't even smug. I was ready. This wasn't going to end in a screaming match or a social media scandal. There would be no rage posting, no burner Twitter accounts, no backroom gossip campaigns. Just the sound of legal documents being read aloud in rooms where smirking sons couldn't charm their way out of accountability. The storm wasn't coming. It had already arrived, but like most real storms, it wasn't loud at first. It was paperwork. It was timestamps. It was the email I'd forwarded to myself, the one with the clause that now held the company hostage. It was a lawyer in a quiet office, flipping through a binder, pausing on a single page, and saying, "This name hasn't changed." Why? It was the exact kind of reckoning that men like Brady never see coming. Because they think control is about titles and calendar invites and the number of people you can interrupt in a meeting. But real control, real leverage, lives in the footnotes, in the clauses, in the spaces between the ego and the ink, and I had all of it. The emergency board meeting began with the usual performative calm, coffee and branded mugs, leather chairs adjusted just so, everyone pretending it wasn't a 4-alarm fire dressed in business casual. The CEO logged in from his home office, still wearing his spin-class hoodie, visibly annoyed that someone had dared to interrupt his morning routine with consequences. Brady, naturally, was already there, smiling, nodding, acting like he was about to pitch a Series B round instead of defend a disaster of his own making. He wore one of those shirts that looked expensive but fit like it was made for someone else, slightly too tight in the chest, like he was trying to squeeze competence out of cotton. The investor's lawyer, a man who looked like he aged 3 years for every page of fine print he'd ever read, was the last to speak. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't thank anyone for their time, just opened a black leather folder, cleared his throat, and began reading. Per Section 7.3 of the Disbursement Agreement, all capital releases shall be contingent on active oversight by the Registered Operational Oversight Officer. Any change to said designation must be filed in writing with the board and acknowledged by the lead investor no fewer than 10 business days prior to the next scheduled milestone. He looked up, not at Brady, not at the CEO, at the entire board. To date, no such filing has occurred. No successor has been named. No formal notice of termination was submitted for the officer on file, Karen Monroe. Silence hit the room so hard it felt like the air had been vacuumed out. Brady, of course, didn't stay quiet. "Okay, but like it's just a naming thing, right?" he said, grinning like a guy who thinks the joke hasn't landed yet. "She's not even here anymore. We've already streamlined operations." The investor didn't even blink. He just raised one hand, palm out. "It's not just about her," he said, voice cold and even. "It's about due process. You broke it." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of that sentence cracked something invisible in the room. One board member coughed. Another took off her glasses and started polishing them like she needed something, anything, to do with her hands. Brady opened his mouth again. The CEO shot him a look that could have melted granite. That's when Brady seemed to realize, for the first time, that his last name wasn't going to save him from a paper trail he hadn't even read. Lawyer continued, flipping the page with slow deliberation. "We will not authorize further disbursements until the matter is resolved to our legal satisfaction. That includes updated filings, verified transitions of authority, and potentially retroactive compliance documentation." He closed the folder with a soft thud that somehow echoed louder than any shouting match. "There is no immediate fix," he said simply. A spreadsheet on the projector flickered. Rows of vendor payments, R&D forecasts, and recruitment projections all grayed out. Every number on the page suddenly theoretical. Vapor. Until the paperwork was right. Someone whispered, "My God," under their breath. The CEO looked pale, not angry, scared. He glanced at Brady, who for once had nothing to say. Just sat there, blinking like he was trying to reboot, because it wasn't just the money. It was what the freeze implied. Projects stalled. vendors unpaid, deadlines missed. A cascading failure that wouldn't hit like a wrecking ball, but like an avalanche. Slow, relentless, and impossible to outrun once it started. They could have had everything handled. The filings, the succession, the continuity. But all of it had been built on the unspoken assumption that I, Karen, was just a background function, that I'd keep going even after being thrown aside. But I didn't storm out. I didn't yell. I didn't go on LinkedIn to write some half-baked manifesto about toxic leadership. I forwarded one email, and I waited. Now they were learning, silence costs millions. By Wednesday morning, the first domino fell. A vendor out of Colorado paused their shipment of precision components, citing contractual irregularities pending compliance clarification. That's a nice way of saying we don't trust you to pay us on time. Others followed. A logistics firm in Arizona stopped field service support. A government contractor in Virginia froze access to a testing environment until documentation was updated with a verified oversight officer's signature. That signature, of course, still bore my name. Inside the company, it wasn't panic yet, but it was damn close. The CEO's inbox reportedly ballooned to over 800 unread messages in under 48 hours. Investors demanding status updates, clients asking what was going on, internal departments lobbing questions at legal like tennis balls fired from a cannon. HR, I'm told, didn't even show up to the Friday sync. The irony? That was one of the only meetings Brady ever attended in full. Well, used to. By Thursday afternoon, Brady's name quietly disappeared from the org chart. Not removed, just rebranded. Chief Innovation Officer became Strategic Advisory Partner, and then by Friday evening, vanished altogether. No announcement, no LinkedIn post, no carefully worded farewell email. He was still showing up to the building, apparently, but no one knew what he was doing. Rumor had it they revoked his badge access to the second-floor server room after he tried to clean up a permissions directory with a plugin he downloaded from Reddit. The IT guy told me that over Signal. Swore he'd never seen a man lose admin rights and still wear a Bluetooth headset like he was closing deals. But the real punch came from the investor. They emailed me directly. No lawyer. No assistant. Subject, let's talk, body Karen. We recognize your unique understanding of our operational framework and the systems you helped build. If you're open to it, we'd love to discuss a consulting engagement. Terms flexible. Discretion assured. Warmly, it was short. Surgical, no flattery, no fluff. Just the kind of message that hits like a scalpel, precise and irreversible. The offer wasn't just about fixing their mess. It was about admitting that no one else could. I didn't answer right away, not because I was unsure, but because it was more satisfying to let them wait. Meanwhile, the board had convened an internal governance review, not just to assess the damage, but to investigate how the CEO's son had been allowed to fire an essential executive without board ratification or HR documentation. Nepotism policies were suddenly trending in the executive Slack, which I still had read-only access to through a forgotten permissions group. The new compliance lead, poor kid, had messaged the wrong thread asking, did anyone actually file the 7.3 update? No one had. Friday evening, I sat in a small cafe 2 blocks from their headquarters. They couldn't see me, but I could see them. It was surreal watching them scramble inside that glass box like ants who just discovered someone moved the sugar. The barista brought my tea. Jasmine, no sugar, no need. The sweetness was ambient now. My phone buzzed, a Venmo notification. From Margot D. Note, you were right. Amount, $7.47 emoji. Teacup without handle, I laughed. Full belly laugh, the kind that comes from deep in the ribs. Margot was one of the old-timers, a payroll wizard with a foul mouth and a brain like a calculator from hell. We used to split tea every Thursday, and every Thursday she'd tell me, one day they'll figure out you were the spine holding the circus up. Looks like she was right too. I sipped, watched the building glow under flickering fluorescent lights. Felt no anger, no rush of revenge, just stillness. That rare quiet that comes not from winning but from being proven. I hadn't screamed, I hadn't begged. I hadn't posted a dramatic farewell on LinkedIn thanking my journey. I just left the gate open and let gravity do what it always does. They broke it. I just stopped holding it together. The second emergency meeting wasn't on the calendar. It was summoned. 7:00 a.m. No agenda, no coffee service, no pleasantries. Just tense faces and an atmosphere so sharp it could have sliced marble. The investors' team had flown, not dialed, because this wasn't just damage control anymore. It was triage. The CEO opened the call, voice strained like a man who hadn't slept since someone read Clause 7.3 out loud. The lawyer slid the binder across the table again, slightly thicker now, stuffed with printouts and redacted email threads, a quiet indictment of everything they thought they could sweep under the rug. The room was silent, except for the soft scrape of the CEO adjusting his glasses. Then he cleared his throat, and in a voice smaller than I've ever known him to use, read it aloud. All capital releases shall be contingent on active oversight, by the Registered Operational Oversight Officer. He changed to said designation must be filed in writing with the board and acknowledged by the lead investor no fewer than 10 business days prior to the next scheduled milestone. He lowered the paper, looked directly at his son. Who, he asked slowly, did you fire? Brady blinked. Once, twice, you could practically hear the neurons misfiring. I thought she wasn't. He stammered, eyes darting like a trapped animal. I didn't file anything, the investor stood. Not abruptly, not angrily, just deliberately, like a man who'd seen enough boardrooms implode to know when the credits were about to roll. He turned to the CEO, picked up his briefcase, and spoke in a tone that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. We'll revisit funding if governance stabilizes. And with that, he left. No slamming doors, no legal threats, just a vacuum of money and credibility so absolute, it sucked the air right out of the room. Brady didn't speak again. Neither did the CEO. Cut to 2 weeks later. A different office. Smaller, cleaner, built with intention, not ego. Natural light pouring across a conference table that didn't seat 50 men with insecurity complexes. I stood in the center, placing a single folder on my new desk. Labeled in matte gold foil, Continuity and Control, How to Build a Company That Outlasts Its Founders. The investor walked in. No entourage this time. Just a subtle nod. No handshake. We didn't need one. We'd like you to lead the rebuild, he said, glancing around the modest but functional space. No boys with last names this time. I nodded once. That was enough. I didn't need the apology. Didn't need the ceremony. I'd been through fire and paperwork and came out forged, not burned. I hung one item on the wall before I sat down. Not a diploma, not an award. Just a printed transcript of the call that started it all. Brady's voice, immortalized in 12-point Courier. I'm the CEO's son. I call, you answer. Underneath, I stuck a bright yellow sticky note, slightly off-center, not anymore. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.